Hello everyone, and thank you very much for coming today. We're going to talk today, this lecture is on Great Master Wonhyo, the amazing genius of early Korean Buddhism. A man who there's really more than 90 minutes worth of things to say, but I'm going to try to get through the most important points for you as we get here. He is certainly the most famous Buddhist monk Korea ever produced. He's the international superstar, even though he's one of the earliest great monks that we know, one of the first 10 names we can really identify from Korean Buddhist history. He remains the best known among Koreans and internationally. With so many things like named after him. Right here in Seoul, there are several Wonhyo buildings. There is Wonhyo Great Avenue and the Wonhyo Bridge running from that avenue to Yeouido Island. There's two different large statues of him right here in Seoul, and many more such around the nation. He is well known in China and Japan among all those who study Buddhism, and he always has been. Further, he's the most beloved of Buddhist monks. He's the one that the public loves in their heart. And I'll show you the reasons why that is true. It's not just respect for a great master as there is with many others, but truly a beloved figure in Korea. Such. First of all, his name, and Wonhyo, and Won means origin, and this other Hyo, bit of an unusual character used in combination for meaning like the dawn, the sunrise, the return of the light, or for understanding, the way that sunrise often comes together with the idea of enlightenment, bring the light returning to the world or the light coming to a darkened mind. Either way and both ways in classical Chinese, it's not usually used by itself, that character. One being like origin, the beginning. It's also the same symbol that is used for the money, so that gets confusing. People think, won, the Korean won, the Japanese yen, the Chinese yuan, that character for the currency, but it's not. It is the same character, but it's not that usage at all. But origin. So the origin of the dawn, or the dawn of origination, perhaps, or the origin of understanding, the origin of light. It seems it's a Buddhist kind of name, but it's kind of unique. Nobody else has ever had that name. No other monk has been assigned that. That's all we know. And Daesa. Daesa means great master. It's one of those posthumous titles that are given after a monk is dead, and a council of masters evaluate their life and career and assign them some title. Daesa, it means great master. Great master. It's a bit generic. There are quite a few Daesas through Korean history. It's not the highest possible title, and we'll mention why later, even though he is regarded as the greatest monk. But he's generally known, Wonhyo Daesa, the great master Wonhyo. Okay. Just to remind you of the basic schemata of Korean history, with 4 golden ages that we can identify when all the great things in Korean culture mostly happened. And this is the Wonhyo spans the right in the middle of this first one. He lived through the 600s at the end of the Three Kingdoms and saw the beginning stage of the unified Shilla kingdom, kind of right in the middle and right in the first golden age, and he is one of the reasons why we call it the first golden age of Korea. One of the reasons. Okay, now this is the Three Kingdoms era, and it's the earliest Korean history that we know. By Wonhyo's time, we have records and stories, written things, and some things written on, carved on stone tablets that remain to us, but still not a lot. And before Wonhyo, things are mostly legendary, only a few clear records. And by his time, we start to get real historical records, such. Now, this is kind of how it was when Wonhyo was born about here in the Anyang town, which is today called Gyeongsang City. And his birthplace is somewhere near the center of Gyeongsang City, a fair-sized town of 500,000 people that's just east of Daegu City, the giant metropolis of Daegu. He was born out here, not in the capital. That's the capital of Gyeongju, the capital of the Shilla Kingdom at this time. Just before Wonhyo was born, in the 100 years before he was born, Shilla had stopped being only this big and had expanded all the way up here under the great king Jinpyong and a couple other great kings had expanded his territory here and here to the Seoul area. We are now right here. Shilla had conquered all of this, and so it was a rapidly growing nation and rapidly being prosperous, being part of the Silk Road trading system through Central Asia and China, and trading with what was beginning to be Japan after about 600, real organized civilization going on in Japan. Royalty, a lot of trade going on, and this becoming prosperous. It was a kingdom getting richer at his time, burgeoning. Now, so he was born in 617, right around the beginning of the first golden age. During Jinpyong's reign, he was a long reigning king and a great one who really strengthened the kingdom and promoted Buddhism heavily. So he was born there, and his birthplace is now Jaesoksa Temple. They've, at least what they estimate, what has people guess was the place where he was born, there has been turned into a Buddhist temple by followers. And it's quite an elaborate one. I don't have a lot of photos, but this painting inside at the main altar shows Wonhyo's birth as a highly sacred event. Wonhyo being born, and as if lots of people were around here and all. This is all very mythological because of his later reputation. And here he's becoming a monk, having his head shaved. We'll get to that. He joins the monastic order, has his first teachings from a great master, later the scene of his enlightenment. All very kind of glorified as if he's a Buddha himself. Only a few figures in Korea have their birthplace turned into a shrine. Very, very few, and especially among Buddhist monks, I only know of 2 of them in all history. One of them is a modern 20th century master, Songjul Sanim, that his followers also turned his birth house into a temple and glorify him as if like a deity. Only these 2 are given that treatment, and it's not really Korean. Korean style for the great masters is generally very humble, real human beings, and they're real people, and they make mistakes. They're not enlightened masters are not divinities and not treated that way. But only in a few cases, really, there's this very elaborate celebration of the person religiously. I don't think Wonhyo himself would approve of this, but who can say? He was born, family name Sul, a minor aristocrat, definitely noble class, and so could get educated and would be expected to be involved with Buddhism, but not a major aristocrat, not a high government official, born well outside the capital, as we see, and that's his original name, family name, Sul, Shindan, a kind of a new holy shrine kind of idea. It's a fairly Buddhist name. It indicates that his parents were Buddhists and that they were hopeful of their son. We don't know if he had brothers and sisters. We don't know anything about his early life, really. None of this. A new era came on, and he became a monk at 15 years old, 632, which is right at the beginning when Queen Sundok took power and the first woman ruler of Korea, and there were only 3 before President Park being the 4th. They're all in the 3 were all in very ancient times. And then just now we had President Park. Korea's been a very patriarchal country, and out of all the female rulers of Korea, Sunduk definitely the greatest, the one who was really powerful and accomplished a lot, strengthened the kingdom, could be considered a successful monarch. None of the others really earned that appellation, including the recent one, and such. But again, it was a time then she was really devoted to Buddhism. This is when great master Jiazhang returned from China. This is the subject of my previous lecture in April. Came from China and really firmly established the foundation of Korean Buddhism. She was the monarch who authorized that. And so when Wonhyo became a monk, just at the time when Korean Buddhism was really launching from a high level and even accelerating as the state religion and getting developed and more temples. So it was really a flourishing time for him as a young man. It must have been exciting and such. He was ordained in the great Hwangyongsa, which had been built. At this time, this great 9-story pagoda was built by Master Jiazhang by about 943, but Wonhyo was ordained 12 years before that. So you have to imagine that this does not exist, just the other buildings in here. But this was the greatest temple of the kingdom. Master Wonguang had made it his headquarters at around 600 and such, right in the middle of Gyeongju City. And this is all that remains today. And they're talking about reconstructing this whole complex on the original site nearby. It's going to be incredibly expensive. I don't know if they'll really do it, and in a way, maybe they shouldn't. But he was ordained there, and he died quite close by there much later. At this time, as a young monk, we believe that he studied the Lotus Sutra, which is the central scripture of the Tiantai or Chuntai teachings of China since about 500 AD. One of the key scriptures of Buddhism, all East Asian Buddhism, in particular in Korea, very important, the Lotus Sutra. Master Nanji was a prominent scholastic teacher of that time. His name is still known, and Master Haegong, who remained a friend of Wonhyo, apparently, and an associate, also taught him, otherwise another famous name at that time. So he was learning under the greats, and in particular, Master Bodok escaped from Goguryeo, and Wonhyo studied the Nirvana Sutra and Vidyadharma Sutra from him. These are more advanced philosophy, more cosmic understanding kind of doctrines that are more difficult. Bodok was the top Buddhist monk of the Goguryeo kingdom, the northern, what is today North Korea into all of Manchuria, the northern Korean kingdom, Goguryeo, the #1 Buddhist monk. But then 10 years before Goguryeo started collapsing, the king of Goguryeo turned to Taoism. Chinese Taoist missionaries came into Goguryeo, and this is the only time this ever happened to any Korean government in history. The king accepted what the missionaries had to say and officially changed his own belief to Taoism and started supporting Taoist temples up in Goguryeo, turned away from Buddhism. Master Bodok, which means treasure virtue, such as the leading Buddhist monk at the time, strongly objected to the king. You can't do this, you shouldn't do this, and if you do, your kingdom will collapse. The king ignored him and continued with the Taoists. Master Bodok escaped down to the Baekje kingdom and eventually Shilla, supposedly meditating in his hermitage hut, and the hermitage hut lifted up off the earth and flew down to the southern kingdoms while he meditated there and landed near the holy mountain Gyeongsan, whatever. But he was welcomed anyway in the southern kingdoms, the great Master Bodok, as kind of a refugee protester, leaver, what do we say? Not exile, but self-exiled in protest, and he became a great teacher, was very recognized in the southern kingdoms, and Goguryeo did indeed collapse as he predicted and was conquered and destroyed. And people, ever since then, people have blamed Taoism for this, officially accepted Taoism, and it's said to be a reason why no other Korean kingdom has ever officially allowed Taoism to be established. So Wonhyo learned from him, it is said. So you got a transmission from the previous generation of great masters. Okay. Now, still he's not enlightened, and we think something about 650. This is before there's civil war going on between, not civil war, but national war between the three kingdoms, but it's not really hot yet. It's not the climax. And he tries to travel to Tang China with his younger friend, 7 years younger than him, Wisang. We'll hear more about later. The two of them tried to go to Tang China, which was fashionable in those days, the greatest Buddhist masters in the world, besides Nalanda University, maybe in India, where had been established in China ever since 500 AD. Chinese Buddhism had gotten going. Chinese started to make their own schools of Buddhism out of what had been imported from India for hundreds of years by monks, and they spent hundreds of years translating, and finally started their own styles of Buddhism. By about 500, by 600, it was really flourishing in China. And by this time, by the middle of the 600s, there were really great Buddhist master teachers in China with new schools of Buddhism, the Hua-Om and the Chente and others that we know here in Korea today that became imported. Okay. So they wanted to go to China to be one of those who, like Master Jiazhang had done in the 630s and returning in 643, Master Jiazhang had gone to China, gotten the teaching, come back, and he was a big hero then, patronized by royalty and becoming the master of the nation. So these guys wanted to follow in his footsteps and do this. So they failed in their first attempt. They tried to go overland through the Goguryeo kingdom, getting to China. They were arrested and accused of being spies because there were wars going on at that time. And traveling Buddhist monks would make good spies, actually. It's a reasonable suspicion. Such. They were arrested, but then they persuaded that they were not spies, and they were released but sent back home. So it was a failure. They couldn't get to China. So try again. Then they head to, Dangjin. So from Gyeongju, once again, trying a second time within just the next year from here, Gyeongju, and that G should be here. And coming up through here, walking through, getting through the Shilla territory here, and crossing into the Baekje kingdom around here to Dangjin. Dang means the Tang dynasty of China. Jin means port. It's the port for the Tang. And still today it has that name, the county there, Dangjin County. It's the closest part of Korea, going straight across to the Shandong Peninsula, the shortest distance across the Yellow Sea to get to China. And still today there's a ferry boat that runs back and forth there. So they were going there to try to get the ship to China and be able to study. And then something dramatic happens. And this is maybe the single most famous story of all Korean Buddhism. The story that everybody knows, and probably in the elementary school textbooks. Such. We will switch to my webpage on that, about this. The story is, basically, the two of them come to the coast, there's mountains near the coast, such, and they're looking out, wondering if the ship is going to come, but then there's a storm. There's a heavy storm rolls in off the Yellow Sea, and it's black clouds and heavy rain pouring, and they're searching around desperately. Where can we stay? Where can we stay? Wasn't such good motels back in those times. by the beaches, and they find a cave. Say, okay, in here. Okay, at least it's dry. And then it's really black. They can't see a thing. Midnight, and it's raining outside. So they just, okay, sleep, and tomorrow we'll deal with everything. And then in the black midnight at 3 a.m., Wonhyo wakes up and he's thirsty, just feeling thirsty, you know, like you do sometimes at night. And he hears a drip, drip, drip over on the side of the cave, dripping sound. So he feels his way over there in the dark, and then he finds a water dripping, and he finds a cup, a ceramic cup is there. That's good fortune, and it has the water in it. Good. And he drinks from the cup and puts it down. He says, okay, goes back to sleep. Go to sleep. Then 6 a.m., the rain's over and the sun is out and light is coming into the cave, and the two of them wake up and they noticed a funny smell going on and such, and they look around and they see dead bodies and skeletons around them. They realize this is a tomb cave. This is a cave that's been used as a tomb by the local people, and there's dead bodies around them. And Wonhyo sees that the cup that he drank from was a human skull. At least the top part of a human skull detached and with maggots on it and such, and that had dripping tomb water in there, and that's what he had drunk. And him and Wisang run out of the cave, and then they're in fear and really disgusted and such, and Wonhyo vomits on the ground, gives it up, and then stands up and bing, he gets it. He understands. He says, it's all in our mind. It's all in our mind. When I thought it was a cup and I thought it was clean water and such, I was fine. I went right back to sleep. I had no problem. Now I see it's dead bodies, and now I'm all totally freaked out and disgusted. These things are all created by our mind. This is one of the basic teachings of Buddhism, of creating our own reality of perceptions, our judgments on what is good and bad and delightful and disgusting and beneficial and evil. These judgments are all just created by the mind, and beyond those judgments is the Buddha Dharma, the truth. He realizes this. It's kind of a simple truth to realize, but this is something where he'd been practicing Buddhism, remember, he'd been meditating and studying for 20 years already, so he's been very well prepared and very well learning these doctrines, but finally he gets it down deep. And that's what enlightenment is, when you get it really deep in your brain and it flows out and actually changes the whole way that you see the world. So, he is awakened. And Wisang looks at him and they're like, whoa, brother. Wonhyo says, I get it. And he explained, and Wisang says, well, good for you. But then he looks over and says, the ship, look, the ship's coming in. Come on, yeah, get your stuff, man. Let's go. We're going to China. And Wonhyo says, I'm not going. I already got the truth. Why do I need to go? Where do I need to go? Why another place? I understand. Wisang says, that's really good for you, brother. I'm proud of you, but I got to go. I'm not enlightened. I got to go to China and study. So Wisang does get on the ship. Wonhyo does not. Stays in Korea. Never did leave Korea his entire life. So you got these paintings, this kind of painting in Korean Buddhist temple. There are so many of them. Wonhyo here with his enlightened delight with the top of the skull. Wisang standing by. Here at a tomb area, not really showing a cave, but here Wonhyo drinking from a skull while Wisang watches. Here a more meditative and peaceful kind of look at Wonhyo and Wisang and their cave, such. Here, more of a startled, you're like, wow! In the moment of enlightenment, difficult to depict in artwork. And back here, you can see in the cave when Wisang is sleeping and Wonhyo is drinking from the skull in the dark. And here, this is a good one. See, Wonhyo's dancing in delight, in happiness, as Wisang says, goodbye. I'm going to China. See you later. And the sun is rising. And such is another depiction of this kind of motif from the same artist, but different temple. Wonhyo dancing in delight. And Wisang saying, see you later. Here's a more artistic view of the drinking from a skull, and Wonhyo on a lotus pedestal symbolizing his enlightenment. Here at a cave tomb kind of a thing. Here, outside the cave, Wisang said Wonhyo and getting inspiration, kind of inspiration view, gaining enlightenment, looking very boyish, very childlike. That's from his birthplace temple. So, although there are so many of these, I could show you a dozen more. This story is frequently, that painting of the story is on Korean Buddhist temples. It's one of their most famous stories. And here's the first reason why Wonhyo is beloved, and not just respected. Wisang went to China, brought back the great teachings, established a great school of Buddhism. Koreans respect him. They have high level of respect. But Wonhyo is beloved because he got enlightened here in Korea. And he said, I don't need to go to China. It's not necessary. Hometown hero, the guy who gets it in his own country. I think there's still the parallel here today of many Koreans, many bright, intelligent young Koreans go overseas. They go to Oxford or to MIT or Stanford and get the latest teachings, the new technology, the most brilliant ideas, and they bring it back to Korea, and they work for Samsung or LG or Hyundai, somebody, and they implement that technology here in Korea, and it really benefits the nation, and people respect them. They say, well, you got your degree at MIT, and then you bring it back here. Good for you, you're really benefiting Korea. But there's a few Koreans who, come up with a new idea, a new technology, a new philosophy, a new something right here in Korea. Think it up themselves, right here on home soil, at one of the Korean universities, and it becomes something really great. There's not many of those, but there are some, and the public loves those people. Recently, we've had Mr. An Chul-soo, a politician, and really his whole reputation is based on that. He didn't get his ideas overseas. He developed new computer software programs right here in Korea, made them very successful for the Koreans and spread internationally, and so the public really thought he was a real hero, and they let him become a politician, and he was popular. He was not successful as a politician, but for a while it looked like he might be our next president. And such, same kind of idea. Wonhyo is loved as the hometown guy, the guy who got it here, who didn't have to go overseas as so many others. Okay. So it is said that the formal Buddhist term for what Wonhyo realized there is called the consciousness-only school, that it is our consciousness, it's our mind that makes these judgments and kind of constructs reality, makes a structure of reality around us that is often false. He is variously recorded in different records as saying things such as, my perceptions of the world are based on the condition of my own mind. The mind makes the judgment. Because of the arising of thought, various phenomena arise. Because of thought itself, when thought ceases, you stop thinking. Meditation situation, meditation, a cave and a grave are not two. The difference between a cave and a grave is not. It's a unified reality and something. That's a very famous statement of basic Buddhist doctrine that he minds. He also said, since there are no dharmas outside of the mind, why should I seek them somewhere else? Dharmas meaning thought forms, the way that the structures of our thinking process that they all come from, generated in the mind. Why should I seek new dharmas in another country, somewhere else? It's right here. The truth is here. And he said, since the Dharma is the same in Shilla, or Korea, my country, as in China, or India, the truth of the Buddha is the same, I will not go to the Tang. I will not go overseas, because the truth is equally everywhere, and I've realized the truth here. So this beloved aspect of Wonhyo, getting enlightened, making it right here. And something a little national pride of him. Later, during his life, Shilla conquers this much area together with China and then kicks China out of here, and the Balhae kingdom forms, called the North and South era, what we used to call the unified Shilla era, but this is what then later becomes Korea as we know it. This happened during Wonhyo's lifetime. During this period of time, when the civil wars were really the big war between the three kingdoms, really like 676 through 678 and such, and right in the middle of this time, Wonhyo then serving as the great master of the kingdom. He went back to Gyeongju with his newly found enlightenment, and even though it wasn't officially certified by any other master, he quickly gained the reputation of a great enlightened monk, what we call a living Buddha, living, walking human Buddha. Got the reputation. He became a scholar, writing things about Buddhism and lecturing to all kinds of audiences, monastic audiences, popular audiences, and royal audiences summoned to the palace to lecture and given great approval. These are pictures of him as a scholar, as a master, like on a throne, a Chinese style chair that a master would sit in to lecture or receive disciples or whatever. This is a famous painting, in fact, from Japan, from a major temple in Japan, where they later they knew him very well. They knew of him. Okay. He became a prolific writer. We think more than 80 works, either essays or books. 80 works during this time of about 35 years. 200 fascicles. These are meaning one scroll or one paper volume of those days. 200 of those. A prolific writer, and there could have been more that have just totally lost to us. These are the ones we know of because other people have mentioned their titles and works. Only 22 of these 80 works, 22 are either full or fragments of them. That's all we have, but still it's a pretty substantial amount. We don't have much more than that from any other figure of the ancient time of Korea. It's really quite a lot because Wonhyo's works were recopied and transmitted so much, including to Japan and China. That's why despite all the civil wars and the book burnings and the floods that lose collections of manuscripts, beside all that, 22 of Wonhyo's works do remain to us, which is quite a lot comparatively. And they're now, you can read them in modern Korean and in Japanese, Chinese, and in English. They're still working on a full digital translation into English that's online and searchable. He's still regarded as very vital in studies right here at Dongguk University, the nation's major Buddhist university. Wonhyo gets a lot of study still. Okay, he exculpated the great, most important texts from all these Mahayana schools of Buddhism, and this is pretty much all of them, really, all the major Mahayana schools that you can think of East Asia. He studied them, he commented about them, and worked to unify their theories, all these different ones. It's pretty much all. Now, Master Huisan, his friend, the one who went to China, spent 7 years in China, came back with a new teaching, the Hua Om Zhong, which is Hua Yen Buddhism in Chinese, and the Avatam Saka Sutra in Sanskrit. It's known that way internationally. In English, the flower garland scripture. One of the most famous kinds of Buddhism today, still very much referred to. It's the kind of Buddhism that teaches that one is all and all is one. The interdependence and interrelationship of everything. We're all connected to each other and to everything. We just can't. Our self-isolation is an illusion. That enlightenment is breaking through that illusion. This kind of Buddhism, it's still really a strong and influential kind, one of the main kinds of Buddhism today. And he went to China. He studied under the greatest master of this kind of Buddhism, the greatest master there ever was, Master Fazang, and he brought it back to Korea, was received with great honor by the king, and he taught it to Wonhyo. He shared with Wonhyo these new teachings, and it was just what Wonhyo had been studying every other previous kind of Buddhism, and then this new thing really helped him bring it together. Wisang established this Buddhism in Korea. That's why he's called Josa. Josa meaning founder of a school. Wonhyo doesn't really get that title, except among a few people, in their opinion. It's a kind of a higher level title, one who founded some particular kind of Buddhism. My next lecture will be all about Wisang and what he accomplished. And that's a whole different story in itself, and a very dramatic one. That'll be in September, I believe. Now, he brought it back and taught this to Wonhyo, and they resumed their friendship, and by all accounts, remained friends the rest of their life. It's what we call a doban relationship. The Korean term doban, a fellow traveler along the way, along the pathway. Think of hiking in the mountains, and a good companion with you. It means a fellow monk, between two monks, but it can be between a layman and a monk, or between two laymen who are on a spiritual path together and regard each other as brothers or sisters. In this way, as a companion along the path. And Wonhyo and Wisang are our best example in history, the most colorful one, of a doban relationship. They were friends all their lives, even up to being old men. They're both highly enlightened, but in a different way, with very different kind of character, but they respected each other, they understood each other, and they kind of worked together as a yin-yang duo to make Korean Buddhism what it became. There's one painting from a temple of them, Master Wonhyo and Master Wisang, still a fairly young man after Wisang came back from China, discussing philosophy with Wonhyo's volumes behind him and such. Just, you can imagine their philosophical conversations about everything. Now, this is a quote from Charles Mueller, who's made one of the very top scholars of East Asian Buddhism there is at Tokyo University for the last 40 years. And he has his own website that he's published many books of dictionary of Buddhism and real standard stuff. And he evaluates Wonhyo most highly. Wonhyo conducted extensive research on all the major Mahayana scriptures and treatises of the time, along with their associated doctrines, with his own work advancing these studies significantly. There is no other major scholar in China, Korea, Japan, prior to the modern era, who exhibited such a combination of range and prolific exegetical mastery of the Mahayana tradition. There's no other scholar in all of East Asia before modernity, no other traditional scholar who has such a wide range and went so deeply and brought everything together in East Asian Buddhism. And this is why, again, he has been studied then for the past 1,300 years in China and Japan. And as we opened up the modern era, as soon as we made contact with Japan around the time of the Olympics, Chinese scholars came over here and said, for a conference on Wonhyo that I attended right around the time of the Olympics, 1988. I went to that conference, and a group of 5 Chinese scholars came over, and they said, yeah, we know Wonhyo. We're scholars of Chinese Buddhism, professors at the great Chinese universities in Buddhist studies, and they said, yeah, Wonhyo's well known to us. We still study his works, etc. And Japan and such, and Vietnam, anywhere where there's East Asian Buddhism. Wonhyo is known such. But there's this whole other side to him. He was not a stuffy intellectual of an ivory tower, even though he was a great scholar. But you got stories like this. Being near the pond of a little temple, today is in Pohang City, but very close to Gyeongju, the capital, and such. And 2 fish were spotted, dead fish floating, and him and Wisang kind of competed. I dare you, I challenge you to make the fish come alive again, exhibiting their powers. And then one of the fish became alive and swam, and then Wonhyo says, "That's my fish. That's what I did." No, we said, no, because fish look alike, right? They're identical. And Wisang's like, no, that's my fish, I did it. They both end up like laughing hysterically funny over this kind of thing. My fish, no, man, it's my fish, etc. And this just shows in the philosophy, it's something about identical beings and then reviving, bringing life, and then competing, claiming something, and realizing the absurdity of claiming any such thing, and just laughing together. And so the temple became called My Fish Temple. My Fish Temple, and that story is still very much valued today of just this humor aspect. This is Owasa Temple, that little pond by the temple. They dammed it up. There's a dam down here, and it became a whole very charming, nice little lake, and the temple's just above it. They have a Wonhyo hermitage further up the mountain. They say that where Wonhyo established, and he lived there, and they claim in the temple museum they have this. They say it's Wonhyo's hat from the 600s. Wonhyo's hat. Straw hat, whatever, the remains of it. They say so. Who knows? My friend Dale provided that photo for me. Now, here, I can't spend hours, as many professors do, and you can find these classes. You can take a whole semester to learn Wonhyo's philosophy, what it was about. But his main concept, I just tell you here, the most famous word, Huajing philosophy, is a term that he coined and such, and the harmonization of disputes, or doctrinal harmonization. See, remember, he studied all these different kinds of Buddhist philosophy, and his goal all the time was to show that they're really the same. Because already there was 15 major Mahayana schools of many different practices, different philosophy. The monks often argued with each other and said, our school is better than yours. Divided religion. Wonhyo worked to show that fundamentally at the base they really have the same meaning. That this is, that it's the same enlightenment, the same truth, the simple truth that Sakyamuni Buddha was teaching. All these things dissolve down there. And it leads to an idea of tongbul. This tong is like tongmil bang. If you're about whole wheat bread here, united or whole or unbroken wheat grain to make bread, and it's the same tong there of complete or whole or unified Buddhism. This is his goal, what he was working towards. Korea has always shown this syncretic tendency throughout its history of not enjoying having different kinds of Buddhism, but trying to bring it together. And Wonhyo was our first great hero of this, to philosophically, intellectually, most all of his writings that I showed you, those 200 volumes that remain, they're all on this theme of taking some kind of Buddhism and showing how it's different from other kinds of Buddhism, what's unique and distinct about it, and then showing that that is subjective. It's from a subjective point of view that shows this unique aspect, and from a more objective point of view, it really is the one same fundamental truth leading to the same. He investigated all these, identified at which their variance occurs, the precise points, and then shows how the differences resulted from subjective views. He demonstrated they lead to the same fundamental universal Dharma truths and the same attainment of enlightened wisdom. fairly successfully. Future centuries of scholars have judged. This is not just superficial stuff to say, oh, well, it's all really the same, but he really went deep on each one and made good arguments and effectively showed that Buddhism is one Buddhism, even though divided into many different schools and practices. So this was successful. The most important essay of his, number one of all, this Shipmun Huazheng Nun, 10 approaches. Shipmun means like 10 gates, gateways, 10 ways to get there, to reconcile the doctrinal disputes. This volume is a basic study, like for any Korean Buddhist monk who wants to be a monk, rather a novice, wants to be a monk and is doing monastic education here at Dongguk University or at any of the great monastic colleges at the great temples like Tongdosa. This is definitely a scripture that they study, virtually memorize, take very seriously, regarded as a fundamental, foundational scripture of Korean Buddhism, and very famous in Japan, China, etc. It's one of those that spread everywhere, and scholars said, wow, for 1,000 years. And such. So that's the one that you have to know, the one book of his that really makes a difference. This is Wonhyo at his birthplace temple as man of wisdom. Here he got the white eyebrows by now, getting older and such. This is his enlightenment, and then various incidences, legendary things during his life, and including teaching to the king, preaching to the king, as Buddha did once himself back then there, and other achieving glory, achieving reputation, the great master of the nation motif. Okay? It can be said he founded his own school of Buddhism. People have always said that after him. It is called by various different names, though. More technically, the Bopsong Jong. He seems to have given that name himself in one document. Dharma Nature School, everything having the Dharma nature, the Buddha nature being inherent in everything. It's still known that way today. The Haedongjung, which simply means, Haedong is sea east, meaning the land that's east of the sea, meaning the Yellow Sea, from China, and it's another word for Korea. It's one word that's always been used for the Korean peninsula, Haedong, still sometimes used today, and so simply the Korean school, founded by Wonhyo, a real indigenous Korean Buddhism, or Tongbulgyo, that character Tong, we mentioned unified or perhaps interpenetrated. Charles Mueller translated that way, interpenetrated Buddhism school. It's known by any of these names. Still today in Korea, there is a Bopsongjong. There is a small sect divided in modern times from the Jogye order of Korean Buddhism that calls itself that and claims Wonhyo as its founder, but it isn't a continuous thing at all. He founded his own school of Buddhism, but not well organized. Well, Wonhyo was not a man of organization. His friend Wisang was. Wisang set up, institutions with an organized bureaucracy. He had dozens of disciples, 10 major disciples enlightened, gave each one of them a major temple, had a whole program of teaching. That was Wisang. Wonhyo, a free spirit. Wandered from place to place, didn't care about gathering money and building institutions, had no bureaucracy behind him, no record keepers. So it did not survive. There was nothing really organized that survived after. We don't know of any actual disciples that Wonhyo had. We don't know any names. We assumed he must have had. He was so famous and all this, but he wasn't the type to just sit down and teach for 10 years and bringing disciples to enlightenment. Not that type. Nobody really succeeded him, and his school is not heard of in later years, except in books. Intellectually, his writings continued. People said that's from the Bopsong school, but there wasn't any real Bopsong school until modern times. Some monks have this, and you can find their temples in a few places around Korea, claiming Wonhyo to be their founder and such. However, it influenced everything. all the way. So, even though he was not an organization man. Now, something happened, and we don't know the timing on this, and in some ways the dates don't fit together. It doesn't quite make sense, dates from different sources. But somewhere around 650, and Wonhyo would have been then just, at that time, 33. But many other sources put this story later, even 20 years, 25 years later when he's approaching 60. We don't know. But anyway, Princess Yosok. Princess Yosok. Is a famous story, and this is the sort of thing that a Buddhist monk is not supposed to do. But now remember, Buddha never said don't have sex. He don't have any sex. Buddha never said that. He said do not have sexual relations that bring bad karma. The same way, he never said don't eat meat. He said don't kill animals and don't create bad karma with your dietary habits. So however that works, and many Buddhist monks do eat meat, just not inside the temple, and many Buddhist monks do have a little sex on the side, sexual relations, when it seems appropriate. The whole point is not bad karma. You don't cheat anybody, you don't lie to anybody, you don't produce a baby and then don't support it, whatever. You don't create bad karma, but if you can have clean karma sex, as it were, in some situations, that's all right. There's really no problem with that, and quite a few monks do, actually, if we want to be honest about it. And Wonhyo's our first example. Now, this princess, she's daughter of the king, and this is a very colorful story that this is from a Korean kind of children's book or whatever. Now, the story is, Wonhyo, just one day in the capital, he's feeling desire for the first time in his life. He's been a celibate monk, since he was a teenager, and he's always ignored and suppressed all that. But one day, he's just feeling natural human desire, and he starts walking around around the city, and he's singing a little song, like a limerick, kind of like today we'd call a limerick, a dirty little song, a little catchy little tune that has some double entendre meaning. It was about an axe head that doesn't have any handle. The handle that fits into an axe head and a handle searching for that axe head. Singing a little song about this, a little double entendre. And it was a catchy little thing. And apparently children who were around the city heard him singing this by following the great master Wonhyo. And children start singing it, and other people start hearing it. And pretty soon the whole town is kind of humming this tune, and people are singing casually because it's just a funny little dirty limerick song. People enjoy it. But see, it refers to the princess. The song makes one little reference to the daughter of the king, Yosok, who had known. Now, she was a widow. This is the thing. As a young woman, she had just gotten married, married to a handsome army captain as the daughter of the king, but then the army captain went off to fight Baekje kingdom and such, and he got killed in the battle. So she was a young widow, left alone. So an axe head wishing for a handle. So an allusion to her. And such. So the word gets to the king, King Muriel, the great King Muriel, who's conducting the great wars to unify the nation and such. Very powerful. Word gets to him that the people around town, they're singing this dirty song about your daughter. Make a reference. I think he's outraged. He's like, who started this? Who is spreading this? Bring them right here. Cut off his head. Punish a capital punishment for such insults to the royalty. Bring him in. The captain of the guard goes out of the palace and searching around, asking people whatever. He comes back and says, Your Majesty, it's Master Wonhyo, the living Buddha of the nation. And so King Muriel says, well, and he got to think of he said, well, he's a living Buddha. He's fully enlightened. If he wants something, who are we to say that he's wrong, whatever. So he allowed it to be arranged. And the story is at this bridge, the Woljung Bridge, the south bridge leading across the South Stream from Mount Namsan, which is the great religious center where probably Wonhyo was staying at the time. This bridge leads across the stream to the palace. And Wonhyo walking across the bridge and then sat for leisure and managed to fall off the bridge, fall off into the stream. So you see here his clothing is wet, and he gets his clothing all wet, and everybody rushes, "Oh, Master Wonhyo, oh my God, are you okay?" And then you figure they take him towards the palace, and in the auxiliary palace, the closest part nearby, that's where, right across the stream is where Princess Yesok was living, the widow. And so that was kind of a raise. "Oh, can Master Wonhyo, can he come inside and change his clothing?" And such. And the princess allows him in. And guess what? They show this later, and this certainly never happened. Look at this, a modern style raised bed, sort of. That's Yesok with the new baby and Wonhyo sitting there being a proud daddy. That never happened. Definitely according to the Samguk Yusa, the original story of the old scriptures and such, it was a one-night affair. Wonhyo stayed for one long night, probably a great night. You know, he'd been saving it up for 30 years, right? And such, and then he was gone. And by the way, this is a fantasy depiction of the bridge that later is promoted by Gyeongju City. The palace would be up here, Namsan Mountain here, and such, and they want to reconstruct it. In this model, they're showing the bridge so high up that if Wonhyo fell off there, it looks like some pretty serious injury. That might not be right, and such. I took this photo from the family shrine of Go-un Chechi-wan, one of Korea's greatest Confucian heroes, such that I was attending just this spring in April, and I took this photo from a distance from that shrine. You can see this here. They are rebuilding. See these towers still under construction here, but this thing, and they build it much lower, closer to the river, and that makes it seem more realistic about falling off into the water and not getting killed. But they're reconstructing that bridge just because it's the famous bridge of this story of Wonhyo and her. Right across the other side of the bridge, beyond these trees, is the historic Gyeongju Che family house mansion that was put up there where some of the auxiliary palace stuff was. And in one corner of that whole complex of many different aristocratic houses is now a restaurant, the Yesokjong restaurant, and named after Princess Yesok, as if it's like her house, and it's a traditional Korean mansion where they serve really high-class Korean food. It's rather expensive, and with a beautiful garden and such, and it's one of the best restaurants in Gyeongju, named after Princess Yesok. So in this way, this story, this legend lives on. And such, and they put all this money into rebuilding the bridge just for tourism purposes and such. It'll be a very nice, beautiful bridge when it's finished as part of Gyeongju tourism. Now, the ancient record does make it clear it was just a one-night stand, and there's no record of Wonhyo ever coming back to her. Now, you might say this is kind of like abandoning a baby, but on the other hand, she's a princess in the royal palace, so the kid's well taken care of and would have plenty of male role models around him growing up and such, so it's not considered a great sin. But still, legend, folklore has Wonhyo running away from that situation, escaping from the capital afterwards, feeling as some sense of shame, like, you know, I shouldn't have done that. I mean, as a monk, I'm not supposed to do such a thing, and running away, although there are at least three places I know that claim that he ran there and spent like up to 3 years, and especially cooling off. These first two, Urumgol means an ice valley. Ice valley, it's not too far from Gyeongju. It's up at the Gajisan mountain, around the slopes of Cheonwangsan, facing towards Gajisan in Ulsan city, right at the border with Miryang city and such. It's an ice valley where facing north that remains chilly even in the summertime. The idea that Wonhyo went and was hiding there and cooling himself off like he had been overheated from his night with the princess I have to imagine he was cooling off. There's this theme. And supposedly at this autumn gold, the way the wind blows, there's a certain sound, a certain howl, and folklore says the princess is calling for him. Wonhyo, come back. That was really great. Let's do it again. Come back. Folklore says this. The other place, up in Wiesang-gun, further north towards Andong City, north of Gyeongju, there is the whole Bingsan-Gegok Valley, where there are natural holes in the rock. The ground is very rocky. There's holes there. Go to a deep underground cave that has very cold air. And in the summertime, the cold air comes blasting out of those holes in the rock. And it is natural refrigeration, natural air conditioning. It's very cool. And local legend says that Wonhyo lived or stayed there for a while. I have this page open, I believe. No. All right, I don't. And I won't even show you that, except if, I won't show you that except later, if we even have time and such. But it's a really remarkable place, an amazing place in Korea with this cold air rushing out of the ground and Wonhyo supposedly cooling off there. The third one on this list is right here at Dongguk, north of Seoul here. It's this area. That's Soyosan, a beautiful little set of mountains with a nice waterfall at it and such, that Wonhyo supposedly went there. It says in the Jajayam that he built a hermitage there. That's the main temple at these mountains, and stayed there for 3 years. An information sign there says so. There's a shrine for Wonhyo at that temple. Stayed there for 3 years, kind of repenting, getting himself back together after this situation. They claim that. And there are several temples around this Seoul area supposedly founded by Wonhyo, and there's a Wonhyo mountain that is part of the Bukhansan mountain cluster, the Bukhansan National Park there. One of the peaks is called Wonhyo Peak, Wonhyobong, and there's a hermitage there, and several of the other temples around that area, like Samcheonsa, and the other one starts with an H, I can't remember, that's claimed that Wonhyo founded them when he was in this area around Seoul. We don't know anything of the truth of any of this. We don't know that he ever left the capital after sleeping with the princess. We don't know anything really about it, but these are the stories, the folklore, the colorful, which kind of add to Wonhyo's. This kind of shows him as really human, even though a fully enlightened being. The story is kind of important to Buddhists in a way, showing that he's human, he had natural desires, doing something natural, had a night with a woman and fathered a son. He's not some perfect being, and Buddhist monks are not said to be perfect, and that's not the ideal, that's not the point, but to behave in an enlightened manner, simply. The result was a son. The princess became pregnant. She gave birth. Wonhyo's family name Seol. He was given that name because everyone acknowledged that he was Wonhyo's son. And Seol Chung. He was the first great Confucian scholar. He grew up brilliant, high IQ, and talented. So inherited from father, apparently. And it's interesting, became a Confucian scholar, didn't become a Buddhist monk, but became a Confucian scholar and served the palace. And he is most famous for creating the Idu script. Just briefly, you know the major problem, the original Korean language had no relationship with Chinese, nothing at all, and still today the grammar is opposite from how Chinese works and all, but all Koreans ever had was Chinese characters to read and write with. So all through history, for 1,500 years, this was incredibly difficult to deal with, reading and writing in Chinese characters, but thinking and speaking in Korean language, which is totally just as much different as American English is different from Chinese. and such, but that's the only written script they had. And therefore, maybe only 5% of the population could ever be literate, ever fully literate. 5%, pretty much all men, all through Korean history, could read and write properly because it took 10 years of study of memorizing Chinese characters and understanding what it meant. This is classical Chinese too, not modern Chinese. Far more difficult, more ambiguous. Seol was the first one to create a system of script, of annotating Chinese characters. You would write the Chinese character, but then some little characters afterwards, some native Korean characters, showing how it's pronounced in Korean and what it might mean in Korean, and adding grammar parts of like and to, and or past tense, future tense, things that the classical Chinese did not have. Little notations which made Chinese characters much easier to read and understand for Koreans. So this is a brilliant thing. This whole problem was solved much later by King Sejong in the 1400s, the early 1400s, who made the Korean alphabet that we know today, Hangul. That was in the early 1400s, but this was in the 600s, making the first attempt to solve this problem with a brilliant little set of notations. So he's known that, and he was a good government official besides, and he is the first figure that was ever enshrined in the Korean Royal Confucian Shrine. Later, when Koreans set up a whole Neo-Confucianism system and established a royal shrine for Confucian sages, Seol is the first one among 18 great Confucian Korean heroes. The guy wrote a book about Chechi-wan. He's the second one. They're the only two from the ancient era, from the Shilla times, the only two of them. But he was the first, Seol, the son of Wonhyo. So really a great figure in himself and a famous person, and resulting from that one hot night. Now, even before I do that, let me show Wonhyo then at his peak. More older figure of him. Not this, but okay. Wonhyo, a modern painting, more him in his maturity. The Japanese painting definitely showing him looking older as a great master. The one in Bunhuangsa, the place where he died, the most famous painting. This one shows Wonhyo and Wisang really as older men with getting white hair, two of them still friends together, matched pair. This is the statue of Wonhyo that's here in Seoul in the Hyochang Park, a large bronze statue that admirers of his made. These are actually from Japan, paintings, drawings from Japan, or black and white paintings. This is him leaving Wisang. This is him with master's staff here lecturing on one of the great sutras. Okay, then this painting at one of the hermitage temples that Wonhyo founded is really a great one, a monumental one, showing him kind of at full glory as, you know, the living Buddha of the nation, lecturing to a great multitude around him, including deities and royalty, kings and many, many monks and unusual figures, and just Wonhyo in his magnificence. Here, even the king of Shilla and a queen, they're listening to him. One of the deities, the lonely saint or Doksong, waiting for the next Buddha to come, is in the audience listening for him, and his magnificent robes befitting a great master. The whole audience of monks, some with rather strange expressions going through and such, and in his maturity and his wisdom and his glory. Okay. Then, back. Okay. We get to then this other aspect of his, and exactly the timing on this again is fuzzy, it's fuzzy. Not quite sure what he did when. According to most popular tales of him, it was after his encounter with the Princess Yasok that this happened, soon after, and others put them earlier or later than each other. It's very unclear, but this idea, the breaking of the brush thing. He was writing a commentary on the great Hwa Om Sutra, that the school of Buddhism that Wisang brought to Korea, the flower garland scripture, writing his great commentary, and he came to the chapter on returning the merit to others. In other words, being benevolent to other people. Whatever merit you have accumulated through your own Buddhist study and practice, you return it to the community, return it to people who need it. In other words, kind of charity and benevolence. And at that point, while he was writing that, his writing brush broke, snapped. Right, and he took that as a signal, because he was just then deeply thinking about this idea of returning the merit to others, and he said, well, I shouldn't just be a scholar, even though he's the most brilliant scholar of the kingdom and doing such a great job of it, but he said, I shouldn't just be a scholar, get out to the people. And he would go out wandering through the countryside, visiting small villages, and preach to common people. See, what nobody did back then. Buddhism was an aristocratic thing, upper class. It was only for the people, the educated people, low class farmers just digging the dirt every single day, whatever, were kind of just neglected out of this. They had no education. It was thought they really had no role in this, and nobody was bringing Buddhism to them. That wasn't such, but he did so. He brought the Pure Land Buddhism, which is really the simplest, easiest kind of Buddhism. It's Buddhism that uneducated people can practice. There was no Zen Buddhism back then, of course. Now, Buddhism was largely a scholastic thing or a complicated devotional ceremonies thing. Pure Land Buddhism is simply wishing the desire that when you die, you can go to a Buddhist heaven. And there, you can learn the Buddhist teachings without any of the troubles and problems of this world. And the way to get to Buddhist heaven is very simple. You simply chant the name of Amita Buddha and declare your faith in him. Korean Buddhists still often do this chant, Namo Amita Bul, Namo Amita Bul, Namo Amita Bul, meaning I take refuge. As we had the 3 refuges at the beginning of this talk, that ceremony. Take refuge in the Amita Buddha. You're simply pledging yourself to Amita Buddha, the ruler of the Western heaven, and just by repeating that, and then be a good person. And everybody knows what that means. I mean, basically, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, all the basics of ethics. Be a good person in your life. Chant every day as much as you can, Namo Amita Bul, and then when you die, you can go to Buddhist heaven. It's a way of giving hope, giving faith to common people, to people who just work all day long and then drink in the evening and just live a simple village life and really have nothing, and there's no philosophy or doctrines for them. But Wonhyo brought the Buddhism to them, and he made them trust him by behaving together with them. He'd go into villages and join their festivals. He would sit and drink with the farmers. And if they wanted to gamble, he'd pull out a few coins and gamble with them. He got drunk with the farmers. He'd dance together with them at their festivals. Other Buddhist monks thought this was horrifying and lacking in dignity. And this was the greatest monk of the nation, the monk who lectures in front of the king in those magnificent robes. The greatest one, but he's out there just getting dirty and getting down with the villagers and such, and doing this, getting them to trust him and to like him, and then teaching them this very simple Pure Land Buddhism for their salvation. Give them some hope, give them some benefit in their life. For this reason, this is the second reason that Wonhyo is loved. Not just respected, loved by the public, especially the left-leaning public. I heard a lot about this in the 1980s during the revolution for democracy. Korea's leftists, the downright communist pro-North Korean students, Wonhyo was one of the only figures of Korean history, one of very few who they respected, who they said, yeah, Wonhyo was a good man. Even though he was an aristocrat and at the very top of the system, he went to the common people to benefit them. He helped the dirt poor farmers, helped them out. He brought benefit. He was a man with a heart for the people. And therefore, Wonhyo is loved by the public for that. Again, as a human being, and really a rather wild one, dancing, drinking, whatever, in with the common people to bring salvation to them. The Samguk Yusa, the actual ancient record document we have of most of Wonhyo's life, uses the term unbridled there. Literally, a horse having a bridle, controlled. A monk is supposed to be bridled. And this goes to the term bride and groom with, weddings and such. Like that's but a bridle, to be controlled and harnessed and such. And Wonhyo became an unbridled monk, just free, do whatever he wants. Again, his friend Wonhyo, his friend Wisang, Wonhyo's friend Wisang, so much the opposite. Wisang, the organization man, with a bureaucracy and a big program of teaching, and he was very strict. He's the kind of teacher, make you do your homework and make you follow the rules or he'll kick you out. And there's strict organization. And the organization that Wisang built with this endured for 1,000 years. Was very, very successful in that sense. Wonhyo didn't leave much behind him. As far as didn't leave much organization, he was a free spirit, what we would today call a hippie. Wonhyo was Korea's original hippie, wandering around just doing whatever he wanted to do. And since he was an enlightened Buddha, whatever he wanted to do, that was the Buddha Dharma and such. So the two of them must be understood together. You can't separate them and say, well, this guy was good and this guy was bad, or this guy was better than the other, and such. You have to understand them as a yin-yang couple that worked together to make Korean Buddhism what it is. And both kinds of masters are necessary. It's masters who are well organized and disciplined and emphasize the rules, and masters who are a free spirit and might lecture about any topic on any particular day and let the students take the students out hiking in the mountain rather than sitting in a classroom. That kind of master. Both kind of masters are necessary for a healthy, thriving Buddhism. And the two of them establish this kind of paradigm of both sides that have endured through history. And masters have their freedom to be one way or the other or both ways. And their traditions of crazy monks through Korean history who are highly respected, who don't follow the rules, right down to the present day. And then those who do follow the rules, and they're both necessary as a thing. I often tell my students to think about it. In the university, it's like that. Different kinds of professors. You have some professors who are really strict, make you do a lot of homework, make you study those books and really learn it. You have other professors who are much more free and kind of inspiring, who give really colorful lectures and use a lot of humor and keep the students interested. And universities need both kind of professors. You can't just have one or can't just have the other. Students need both kinds during their education to get a well-rounded view of things. So Wonhyo was that. His trousers, he wore a big floppy pair of trousers going around, and he painted on the back 2 Chinese characters, no obstacle, no impediment, just on his butt. And such. And he walked through the villages, perhaps hoping that people would see that and ask him, well, what do you mean by that? And then he'd have a chance to stop and teach it. There's no obstacle to enlightenment, no inherent obstacle. He meant there's nothing in the way, there's nothing that blocks us. With a free mind, you can attain it. So, he was that kind of, he was both of these. It's remarkable, you would think you can have a master who's like this, who is the free spirit, wandering the villages, does what he wants. You could also have another master who's the great intellectual, who sits down and writes 100 books of great genius. You wouldn't expect that they're both the same guy. that one guy could be both of those, the teacher to the king and the prominent figure and the great scholar, and also the guy who sleeps with the princess and gets drunk with the farmers. Wonhyo was all of that. It was everything, and he made it work. And this is why his reputation is so strong. And why there's so much folklore. Many stories about him that I don't even have time to tell you, but kind of folklore stories of miraculous events or realizations. And some of them make Wonhyo look foolish. There's a few stories where like Wisang understands something and Wonhyo doesn't get it. That, again, showing him as kind of human as such, as make mistakes like the rest of us. Today in Korea, out of our maybe around 1,000 traditional temples, around like 1,100 temples we think were started before 1900 that we know of, 66 claim that Wonhyo founded them. On very few of them is there any actual evidence of this. Maybe 4 or 5 of them are significant temples, middle-level significant temples. None of these 66 are among the greatest temples of Korea, like my listing of the top 21 temples of Korea that you can find on my website, or anybody else's listing of top 33 or something like that, the headquarters temples of the Jogae order. None of Wonhyo's temples make that list. Wisang has got like half of the top 10 temples in Korea today. Half of them are Wisang's, and another one of them is Master Jajang and such. Wonhyo's, his best temple, 4 or 5 temples are at the medium level and fairly well known. The other ones are very small, 60 of these temples are small hermitages deep in the mountains, places where Wonhyo supposedly wandered and decided to stay for a while and built a shack with some shrine that later other monks came to and developed into a temple to remember Wonhyo. There's the name Wonhyo Wonhyo Hermitage is very common all around Korea. There's a dozen of them that claim that Wonhyo was there and started this. They're all pretty small places, fairly minor, like 60 of them. It's notable. Again, not an organization man, not the kind of guy who founded some system that lasted or institutions. Besides the temples we've already covered, Shilluksa here is certainly one of the greatest ones, one of the top 108 temples of Korea, and it's distinctive of being the only riverside temple. Temples in Korea are usually up on the mountain, on the slopes, not too close to the river because of flooding problems and just no real preference for doing that. But this is really on the South Han River, not too far from Seoul, up at Yeoju City, the same place where King Sejong's tomb is, Shilluksa Temple, and thought to be one of the great ones. And it's high enough up on the rocks that it doesn't flood, even when the river gets really high and such. And this pavilion is called the Wonhyo Pavilion, a reconstruction of supposedly the Wonhyo meditated out here on the rocks. There's a pagoda dedicated to relics associated with him, and then the main complex of the temple. It's one of the major temples of the Gyeonggi-do province area, and Korea's only major riverside temple ever. There used to be a lot of traffic up and down that river, so people would be stopping by, merchant ships and logging ships and such. People would stop by such a place on the river. Cheonggyeongsan is a provincial park north of Andong City, one of the more beautiful sets of mountains in Korea, an incredible place of soaring high cliffs up there, great mountain hiking above there, and this temple set right in the middle. You can easily find lots of stuff on the internet about this temple. Hikers love it. It's right there. They do a very good temple stay program these days too. And Cheonggyeongsa in the Cheonggyeongsan mountain, same name. This temple is also associated with the guy I've been writing about, Go-un Chechi-wan, and also with the great Confucian scholar Taege I-hwang, who's on your 1001 bill. He taught students in this area and used to visit this temple. It's just a few hours walk north of his school that he built near the Nakdong River. this mountain area in this temple. He used to bring students up there to teach. So it's associated with 3 of Korea's greatest cultural hero figures. And this, Wonhyo is attributed with starting one of the most beautiful places in Korea. This is 600 meters high up on the mountain, right over the ocean. 600 meters high on cliffs over the South Sea on Namhae-do, Namhae Island, that's off the south coast of Korea, just off South Gyeongsang province, not too far from, say, Jinju. Fairly isolated place, but a beautiful island of great big mountains all through. And on the south end there, supposedly Wonhyo started a hermitage here. There's a nice spring of water there, and 600 meters up, and he devoted this hermitage to the Bodhisattva of compassion, Gwanseum Bosal. And it is one of the most kind of magnificent scenery places in Korea. This is also associated with Go-un Chechiwan, the great scholar genius who was 250 years after Wonhyo, also associated with the foundation later of the Joseon dynasty. The first king of Joseon dynasty, while still an army general, prayed at this place, supposedly prayed there to become king and found a new kingdom. And his prayer was answered. There's a shrine for that here. Wonhyo supposedly started this. I'll do a later lecture in this series about these special temples for bodhisattvas around Korea, which tend to be incredibly beautiful, scenic, lovely places, and I'll show you more and such. Now, we get to the end, 686, Wonhyo died. So he would have been almost 70 years old, about 69 years old. And he died at the, or nearby anyway, the temple that he was most associated with, that we knew he stayed at this temple. It was a large, complex temple originally. He stayed there and did a lot of his writing, a lot of his major scholarship at this temple. And this is at Naksan, the temple that's near the mountain, small mountain, nearby Namsan, the great religious mountain, south mountain of Gyeongju. Naksan, named after the residence of the Bodhisattva of compassion on the south side of Gyeongju city and such. Bunwangsa, it's a major tourist attraction today. It's right next to those ruins of the Hwangyongsa temple that I showed you, the biggest, greatest temple of Gyeongju. This was originally kind of an annex temple, but founded by Queen Sunduk, the great queen who I showed you, and Wonhyo stayed here. This is today their historic 200-year-old main hall, the only thing that really remains historically of that temple. This one, it's one of the great old temple buildings of Korea, and it houses a statue of the Yakse Yorebul, the medicinal Buddha. That's one of the greatest such statues of the nation, again offering beneficence and mercy to the common people through the provision of medicine and healing. It's one of the great devotional statues. Still many people come and bow to this today. And in the back of that hall is this main portrait of Wonhyo, perhaps the greatest surviving old painting of him. That's the one that's best known. I've already shown you this one and the Bodhisattva healing Wonhyo as a scholar here with his scholastic books and such. So he did this work in this temple. This temple is very famous for this faux brick pagoda. This was built by Queen Sunduk. It looks like a brick. It's made out of bricks, and it was originally either 7 stories or 9 stories tall, a really huge building. Only these 3 stories remain. But these are not bricks. Korea never had bricks until the Westerners came here and brought brick technology from China. Korea never developed bricks, but some old scriptures brought from India. In India, they had bricks, and scriptures from India talked about brick pagoda and how you should build a brick pagoda for certain kind of devotionals. Koreans didn't have any bricks, so Queen Sunduk organized hundreds of laborers to carve granite stones, granite rocks into brick shape, into identical rectangle shape of a bricks. according to the carving granite stones. How much work was this? Imagine carving 10,000 granite. Took several years for hundreds of workers to cut and carve all these granite bricks, and then they built a brick pagoda because they thought that's the proper way you should build a brick pagoda. They didn't have any bricks, so they did what they could. So this remains, it's one of the great national treasures of Korea. Wonhyo, presumably. Inside here would be study rooms, and pagodas like this, see, had entranceways and were all used as library facilities. They stored scriptures in there. So Wonhyo himself probably spent time sitting inside this scripture, getting scrolls and studying them, and possibly where he sat and wrote some of his stuff, we don't know. This is from the air, the way it now is. They put a kind of a roof on it. It was originally higher. One of the great treasure complexes of Korea. Treasure building, got these ancient Shilla-style guardian figures on the doorways, very evocative. Tang Dynasty stylings, such. This old broken Buddha sits half buried in the garden. Inside one of the doorways, there's a niche with just a Buddha statue inside there now. A beautiful place. The mountain spirit painting of that temple. And a well, an old well that still is there and still has water down at the bottom of it. Supposedly, he had done his scholarship there. He either died at this temple or somewhere nearby, and his son, Sol Chung, had him cremated, as Buddhist monks are done, but then collected his father's ashes and put them inside of a plaster statue, either a statue of Wonhyo himself or a Buddha statue. It's not clear. It's ambiguous. Not sure, but had a statue and had it gilded with gold and put into this temple. That statue, unfortunately, no longer survives, cannot be found. We don't know what happened. So therefore, Wonhyo has no tomb. Wonhyo has no Buddha monument with his ashes inside of it, like most of the great masters, some pagoda or a stone reliquary. Not that. His son put him inside of a statue, and there is a memorial, but that does not survive to us. Finally, to say, and now this is nearby, some artworks nearby the temple and such, and this is the great Hwangyongsaji, the ruins that are just outside of that temple. Now, to finish up, just to say, a bunch of us did start a project some 10 years ago that we were slowly making some progress on. This was the idea of Mr. Tony McGregor, a Canadian journalist who is currently living in Thailand. But he had the idea to make a pilgrimage trail. Remember the map that I showed you early in this lecture of Gyeongju, the ancient capital, and then across to Dangjin, the way that Wonhyo and Wisang walked on their second attempt to get there. And then at Dangjin, Wonhyo drinks from the skull and attains his enlightenment, to make a trail across Korea from Gyeongju to Dangjin to commemorate and celebrate Wonhyo and his legacy. And I designed the trail on topographic maps to pass by as many as possible of the remaining temples that Wonhyo started, such as the Cheongyangsa, the beautiful place that I showed you, so that travelers could walk. It would take about 3 weeks if you do it properly. 3 weeks. From Gyeongju, walk north through all the mountains, stopping at places like Cheongyangsa and staying overnight at temples associated with Wonhyo, discussing Wonhyo with the monks, discussing philosophy and contemplating it as you walk, making it a meditative walk, and crossing the Baekdudaegan Mountains, about the Mungyong-seje area, probably where they went through, and then heading across North Chungcheong Province and South Chungcheong Province. It gets kind of urban and the trail gets lost. People might have to use buses to make it really viable. There isn't any walking trail. You got to go through some pretty industrial cities, but finally to the west coast and getting there to Dangjin. And nobody knows where was this tomb cave where Wonhyo was enlightened, but there are a few sites that claim to be, and at one of them there's a nice cave in the mountains that claims to be the Wonhyo cave, and we make that the end of the trail, and then hikers have a little ceremony with we got to do this originally, we got plastic skulls, plastic human skulls, and filled them with water and passed them around. Everybody have a drink as a ceremony and just remembering Wonhyo and his great enlightenment. Making this a pilgrimage trail, making it a hiking thing that tourists can do to see Korea, see some of the best of Korea, see some really wonderful places and deep rural countryside through the mountains by the Nakdong River, some really great temples to stay overnight, and as a pilgrimage trail, and as a project, help give Korea tourism more of a spiritual cast. And all along the trail have teachings of Wonhyo and discussions of his philosophy and just commemorating his greatness. It's an idea, and it's been going for about 10 years. We haven't really got government cooperation on making this really happen yet. They did make a video. You can see this website, anybody can, of Tony McGregor's website and such. They did make a video of the trail, of ourselves on the trail doing the walking and such, and it's a good project, and maybe someday it will come to fruition. Maybe it'll really happen. We hope so. Wonhyo is someone who deserves to be remembered. In the whole history of Korean Buddhism, why Korean Buddhism is really Korean, Wonhyo's a major factor who made that happen, along with his friend Wisang. He's really just one of the most important figures and very inspiring in a way for our own practice. He kind of shows the multiplicity of ways to go with scholarship and with free mind and spontaneous enlightenment. He helps set the stage for Zen Buddhism to come into Korea later, with these ideas of intense meditation experience leading to sudden awakening, as he had with the skull. Factors like this, he can inspire our own practice and inspire us to be adventurous Buddhists, to go out there and see what the world brings and respond spontaneously to events and people and practices, and do what we can to make this a better world as we journey towards enlightenment. That's the value of Wonhyo for us today. Thank you very much.